It's late at night. Absolute silence. But suddenly, your phone vibrates on the wooden table. A dull, incessant rumble that chills you to the bone. This sound used to be a sign of connection. Today, it feels like a crushing weight on your chest. You stare at the display. A familiar name lights up. A friend, a relative, someone who has used you as nothing but an emotional dumpster for years, someone who always just takes, but never asks how you're actually doing. You used to pick up immediately. You would have listened, comforted, sacrificed your own energy, but today, something strange is happening. You no longer feel compelled. You feel no guilt. You pick up the phone and place it face down. In that moment, the silence returns, and with it, an exhilarating feeling of freedom. Have you ever wondered why doing nothing can suddenly become the bravest act of your life? Why people who for years were the most loyal sources of strength for others suddenly and without a word pull the plug? The world calls it heartlessness. They call it ghosting. But today, we're looking at it through a completely different lens. It's not a betrayal of others. It's the silent salvation of your own soul. In our modern world, there's a word that sounds almost like a judgment: ghosting. When we hear this term, we immediately think of narcissists, of people without a conscience who throw others away like toys as soon as they get boring. Society teaches us that sudden silence is an act of cruelty, a sign of cowardice. But what if we turn this perspective completely upside down? What if this disappearance is, in truth, a selective absence? It's not a malicious abandonment, but an emergency break. A last, desperate attempt to protect the core of one's own being. In psychology, there's a term that explains this phenomenon: compassion fatigue, the exhaustion of empathy. Imagine your empathy like a bank account. For years, you were the most generous person. You constantly made deposits. You gave your time, your tears, and your mental strength to people who never gave anything back. You watched as your account balance steadily declined, while the demands of others grew louder and louder. At some point, this account reaches zero. In that moment, a biological defense mechanism kicks in. Your system freezes your account. It refuses any further transactions, not because you've become cruel, but because your emotional survival depends on keeping the last bit of your balance for yourself. This silence isn't a weapon you wield against others. It's the protective wall you build around the wreckage of your own soul. It's the moment you realize, if I don't leave now, I'll drown in other people's problems. Do you know the feeling of only being loved because you're useful? You're the anchor in every storm, the rock against which others' worries crash. The world loves you for what you give, for your time, your ear, your infinite patience. But in this love lies a bitter trap. People don't love you. They love the service you provide. By becoming the eternal shoulder to lean on, you've become almost inhuman to them. They've forgotten that even an anchor eventually gets eaten away by rust, that even a rock develops cracks. They see your smile, but they don't notice the black abyss of exhaustion within you, which grows a little more each day. Imagine Anna. Anna was the heartbeat of her group. When someone cried, she was there. When an argument broke out, she was the bridge. She was proud to be the strong one. But one evening, as she sat silently at the table, something strange happened. She had no more advice. Her words were like dried leaves. And in that silence, she noticed the cruel truth. As soon as she stopped giving, the others stopped seeing. She was no longer a friend. She was an emotional transaction, a vending machine where you deposit worries to get comfort. And when the machine jammed, people simply moved on to the next one. Anna didn't flee from her friends. She fled from that role. She fled from the image others had painted of her, an image that left no room for her own weakness. Here lies the painful paradox. The deeper your understanding of the human psyche, the clearer you see the patterns of exploitation. You recognize the repetitive cycles, the eternal promises without action. At some point, you understand. Talking doesn't do any good anymore. Words are exhausted. The only language left to save your dignity is silence. It's the bitter realization that some people will never understand you, no matter how often you explain it. So you stop explaining. You just leave. But why do we choose silence of all things? Why is it so hard to just say no instead of disappearing entirely? The answer is buried deep within your nervous system. Researcher Stephen Porges describes this in his polyvagal theory. He explains that our body possesses an internal security system. When emotional stress reaches an unbearable level, when you feel truly overwhelmed by the demands of others, your brain switches modes. It no longer chooses to fight. It doesn't even choose to flee. It chooses what's called the dorsal vagal shutdown. This is like a master switch that's suddenly flipped. Your system cuts off the connection to the outside world to prevent a total internal collapse. You don't go silent out of stubbornness. You go silent because your fuses have blown to prevent your soul from burning out. This mechanism was often trained decades ago, in your childhood. Psychiatrist Murray Bowen spoke of the concept of emotional cutoff. Imagine a child who had to learn to read their parents' moods like a weather report before they could even speak. If, as a child, you were responsible for your parents' happiness, a phenomenon we call parentification, then you learned that closeness meant danger. Closeness meant work. Closeness meant giving yourself up to save others. Your alarm system is therefore extremely sensitive today. If someone gets too close to you or demands too much from you, your brain registers it as a hostile invasion. In your world, disappearing was often the only place where you were truly safe. In the silence, you find the space that was never given to you as a child. You don't withdraw because you hate people, but because you love the peace you only find in your own absence. But we have to be honest with ourselves. Every remedy can become poison if you don't know the dose. There's a dangerous line between necessary self-care and a compulsive escape. If disappearing becomes your only response to every conflict, you run the risk of falling into a pattern that psychologists call an avoidant attachment style. Here, it's no longer about recovery, but about fear. If you slam the door at the slightest disagreement, you're no longer protecting yourself from others. You're cutting yourself off from the possibility of truly being loved. Imagine you're building a fortress to protect yourself from the storms of the world. The walls are thick. The gate is firmly locked. Initially, you enjoy the peace. But if you never go out again and never let anyone in, this fortress will slowly but surely become your prison. Isolation without inner healing is merely a postponement of pain. If you only use silence to shut out the voices of others, but never soothe the voices in your own head, you won't be free in your loneliness. You'll just be a prisoner within your own walls. True strength isn't about disappearing forever. It's about finding the strength to return, but on your own terms. Don't confuse a necessary break with a lifelong retreat. Your goal should be to turn the walls into doors that you can open and close whenever you deem it right. Don't let self-defense become your identity, because at the end of the day, humans aren't meant to live in a perfect, yet completely empty world. Imagine a forest that has been ruthlessly deforested for decades. The soil is depleted, the springs have dried up, and the trees no longer have the strength to withstand the wind. This forest doesn't need a new summer, bright light, or hundreds of visitors. It needs a winter. It needs the icy silence that allows the ground to rest under a thick blanket of snow. In this cold, the parasites die. In this darkness, the earth gathers the nutrients it needs for a new spring. Your decision to withdraw, this sudden silence that irritates others so much, is exactly this winter. It's not an escape from life, but the radical protection of your own living space. You let the world's expectations freeze outside your door so that your inner core can survive. We must stop believing that we constantly owe the world an explanation. You don't have to apologize for prioritizing your own integrity over the convenience of others. You don't have to justify cutting ties to save your sanity. This silence isn't cowardice. It's a form of quiet courage. It's the sacred promise to yourself that you will never again allow your boundaries to be trampled like dust. Take the time you need. Let the snow fall. Let it become quiet. Because only when the noise of others subsides will you hear the voice again that you've ignored for so long. Your own. This isn't an end. It's the preparation for a version of you that no longer just exists to serve others, but who has finally learned to breathe for itself. If you are currently in your personal winter, if you have muted the world to finally be able to breathe again, then know you are not alone and you are not wrong. If these words have touched something in you today, then leave us a sign. A simple dot in the comments or a blue heart is enough. It's a quiet signal to us and to everyone else here that you've found your peace. We understand what you're going through without you having to explain a single word. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel to become part of our community of seekers and healers. Your support helps us to continue these deep psychological journeys. And if you're wondering what happens after the silence, watch our next video. There we discuss how to set healthy boundaries without ever feeling guilty again. Take care of yourself, because your peace of mind is your greatest asset. Until next time.